Hello and welcome to the Midwest Motoring Podcast, sponsored by Hagerty. My name is Matt Pesaconis. I'm the Regional Territory Manager here in Columbus and Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm also your host on the Midwest Motoring Podcast. I am joined this week by an amazing guy who's been doing so much for the automotive community. We're going to kind of talk with him how he started the Cars and Coffee group here, a little bit about what he does, and then we're going to get into just kind of life and just about everything. We're going to do a two-parter. So this first one's really going to be about him and like our thoughts on the automotive enthusiast, where the car culture is going, all that kind of great stuff. And then in part two, we're actually going to be doing a little bit later. We'll do another episode because this one went a little bit long to talk about the SSC Tautara, however you want to pronounce that. We're going to talk a little bit about the controversy surrounding that car on part two. So this is going to be a two-parter. So part one, we're really just going to get into it. But we're going to talk, like I said, about the Columbus Cars and Coffee group, kind of how it got started, the things that they've been doing with the enthusiasts here in the Central Ohio area. So I'm really excited to be joined in studio. And we're going to get right to it. First, I guess I do want to thank Hagerty, our sponsor. Hagerty wants to make sure that you guys know if you have any type of enthusiast vehicle, whether it be a tractor, a sports car, a convertible, a weekend warrior, a track weapon, a race car, a tractor, a retired, commercial vehicle, a boat. Like, we are the one-stop shop for some amazing coverages on those types of toys. We've also got some great news for our agents. We've been partnering with a company called Paul Mall Art Advisors. We're going to be doing a 1 credit hour CE for a lot of financial advisors, where we're partnering with them to talk about the best ways to help their clients protect their assets, including potentially their exotic and very rare and expensive car collection. So we've got an episode on that. Go check that out. But if you are an agent or a financial advisor listening to this and you know that you might need some continuing education coming up, why not do it in a fun way with Cars and Paul Mall and Hagerty? So check that out. But we're going to be getting to our interview with our guest right after this. Welcome back, everybody. So I am joined in studio, like I said, this gentleman, he is the owner of Best Light Video Productions. He is the owner of a couple of different real estate investing companies. He is also the runner and the owner of Columbus Cars and Coffee. Huge car guy. I'm, of course, talking about Paul Milligan. Paul, welcome to the show, man.
Matt, thanks so much for having me, man. This is really cool, and congrats on 22 episodes. That's awesome.
It's definitely something I didn't think I'd be doing, but due to COVID and 2020, it was a great creative outlet for sure. But we really wanted to kind of just get into your history. So you own Best Light with another guy. You own a real estate investment company. You're doing Columbus Cars and Coffee. There's just so much that you do.
Yeah, people always ask me when I meet them, hey, what do you do? Like, what kind of work are you in? And it's a difficult question for me to answer because I do a little bit of everything. When I was in my early 20s, I decided that I, for whatever reason, wanted to work for myself. It was really important to me that I build my own stuff and do my own thing. And I just felt like, I wasn't going to make a very good employee for anybody, and I owned that right away in my early 20s, and I thought, let's just build around that fact and go ahead and go to work for yourself. So what are you going to do? And I had an interest in IT and technology at the time, and a much longer story short, ended up creating a video production company at the suggestion of a friend and mentor. He was doing a lot of marketing for healthcare stuff and wanted to expand into video, which at the time, YouTube was like just coming online. There was, at that time, more like DVDs and that kind of thing. It wasn't as much online. But anyway, we started Best Light Video in 2008 to meet demand for video for the internet. And that was really kind of a self-taught craft for myself and my business partner, Andrew. We had a client right out of the gate, which was kind of a funny way to start a business. We had a project and a paying client with a contract ready to go right at the beginning, and we used the money from that first project to buy the equipment, and we knew a little bit about what we were doing, but we were going to self-teach the rest, and that's exactly what we did. And the project took about 6 months to complete, way longer than it would take now, of course, but we were kind of figuring it out as we went, and the client was great. They knew we were new, and they were just kind of letting us figure it out as we went.
That must have been a huge weight off your shoulder to be like, hey, we know that you're learning. You obviously have the expertise and training, but you're going to be cutting, your stone. You're going to be sharpening that edge.
Yeah,
on
I mean, it was lucky because we were able to give them something that at the time, and I mean, really not that long ago, video production was very complicated and very expensive. And if you wanted a custom DVD or a video, I mean, it was $10, $20, $30, $50,000 easily, without even it being difficult. But, we're sitting here talking on a podcast. I mean, you look at how technology has become democratized, how much easier it is to access, how low the barriers to entry have become. And, the good news for, people in the production industry is that now everyone has an understanding, thanks to social media, that you have to be doing a podcast, a video, a YouTube channel, whatever, to remain relevant, to connect with your audience. And the bad news for people in the production industry is that due to the lower cost of entry, everyone and anyone can now compete with you if you're a production company.
And that definitely, it dilutes the product a little bit, I would imagine. It
can confuse people about what quality actually looks like, what sort of pricing is fair. But, at the end of the day, what we specialize in today is actually different from what we used to. We are now a motion graphics and animation studio.
Okay.
I have no background at all in that, to be honest. I was trained in live action video. I mean, actually filming stuff and editing video, nonlinear video editing. Motion graphics and animation was something that we were receiving large demand from clients for, and we just decided, well, do we want to offer this or not? We need to figure this out.
Right.
So we've hired really talented designers. We have a whole team of people. They're around the country and around the world. A couple of them are here in Columbus, and a couple of them are in other parts of Ohio, but the majority of them are spread out around the world.
Wow.
And that was actually because of a project we had that was so large that we needed to work around the clock. And so we built our team accordingly for this one client, one project, which is over. But when COVID hit, after that project, and everybody was working from home, it was like, we're ready for this. We've been doing this for a few years.
It was just like, it wasn't a shift. It wasn't anything you were uncomfortable with. It was just moving along to the next step.
Yeah, all the systems were in place to manage a team like that and to work collaboratively and creatively. We've been really lucky. And it's an interesting business. Every project's different because you're working for a client in a totally different industry from one to the next. I've been to prisons, military bases, ports, factories. I've seen how a million different things are made and manufactured and produced. The other thing is when you have a camera or a podcast, I think a lot of people open up to you in ways that they wouldn't normally, and sometimes even tell you things that they shouldn't or wouldn't in a standard conversation, especially when you're like in their factory or you're in their office.
I can only imagine that there's plenty of content that we could add to hundreds of podcast episodes just from that.
Exactly right, yes.
But I mean, you're a pretty honest person, and you're also pretty humble, but Best Light has won a couple different really great awards, like the Ohio Interactive Awards, correct?
Yeah, we won a couple of Ohio Interactive Awards a couple years in a row. We've done some really cool work, and we have really talented people that work with us, and our clients are great too. They often give us a lot of leeway to drive the creative of a project, so we get to really steer the direction of a lot of the work we do. And I think that's the most rewarding work. Somebody can come to me with a script and a budget and a timeline and say, can you do this, and go. And that's fine. We do that work too. But the better work is when the client has a general goal, a general idea. They have a story to tell or a message to communicate, and it's like, help us do this.
Right.
And we get to be involved in
collaborators.
That. Absolutely.
Not just the end-all, be-all creator, but collaborators, right? So it sounds like you've worked with some pretty awesome and fun partners. Do you want to mention any of them that you've gotten to work with in the past? Is that something you can do?
Sure. I mean, we've worked with a lot of major brands in video production. We're lucky here in Columbus, Ohio, Central Ohio, to be home to a lot of very large companies. And that's benefited Best Light Video because we've had access to leadership at businesses we might not normally have. So we've done a lot of work with people like Tim Hortons, national and international fast food chain.
Yeah.
We've worked with a company that most people will never have heard of, but they use a lot of their products and just don't know it, and it's Acuity Brands. Acuity owns 32 lighting companies, 32 brands. They all make different kinds of lights, inside, outside, highways, all kinds of lighting.
Yeah.
And no one's ever heard of the parent company, but we get to make videos about their products and services and shoot them in really cool places. We've worked with just so many companies. We've, here, if you're familiar with Columbus, Ohio, one of our very first projects was with the North Market, and a lot of it's, it's an iconic landmark, kind of a, indoor market, lots of restaurants and stores. We got to profile every vendor in the North Market.
Oh, wow.
And do a little, piece on each one for them a long time ago. And it was one of our first projects. We loved it so much. It was one of our great ways to introduce ourselves to Columbus, and we won an award for that project. It was just really fun to do.
That's awesome. And North Market actually is going to be joining us in the Bridge Park area where the next Dublin, where the next Haggerty building is going to be. So that they have a great partnership with Dublin now. They are a mainstay of the Central Ohio, Columbus area. So that's huge, man. But you don't just do that. You also got into real estate investment. Tell me about that.
I did, yeah. So I moved to Columbus from Delaware, Ohio. It's about 30 minutes north of the city of Columbus. And I moved down to Columbus when I was 20. And since that time, the city has grown exponentially. I mean, we're netting between 50 and 100 new residents a day on average, according to our local people who track that sort of thing. And as a result, there's just development everywhere we look. And so living here for a while, I was watching all these changes around me, and I just wanted to be a part of that. It was like the city was changing. It was getting bigger, better, cooler, nicer, newer. And still retaining all the things that I loved about Columbus originally. I mean, in its essence, it's the same place it's always been,
right? But
it is growing up a little bit, and so both for just sheer financial reasons, wanting to invest in something, but also wanting to be a part of a movement, I wanted to start investing in real estate. So I did that about 3 years ago. I have around 10 properties now. I own a couple of them with a business partner. The majority of them myself, and I have some commercial, some residential, some of it's multifamily. I have one vacation rental property, so I've kind of tried a little bit of everything in terms of the major categories, and that's been very intentional so that I can learn more about it. What works, what doesn't, what do I like, what don't I, what makes money, what doesn't, all of those things.
Learn by doing.
And it's been really awesome. It's a very rewarding, for me anyway, business. It's really interesting. You meet a lot of people. You get to be a big part of people's lives. I mean, where you live is a huge thing, and where you work is a huge thing.
Right.
So
you spend most of your time in either one of those spots, right?
Exactly. And you, as the landlord or the owner, you're a small piece of that for them. So it's pretty cool.
Now, the whole reason we're even here, and one of the big reasons that I wanted to talk with you, is not really because of those. Now, granted, those are really great insights into who you are and how you got here, but it's Columbus Cars and Coffee. That's really the meat and potatoes. Obviously, from Haggerty, we are helping partner with you guys to make sure that Cars and Coffee is continuing to grow, continuing to expand, and continuing to get more and more people involved, right? But I think a lot of people don't know really kind of the history of this Columbus Cars and Coffee because, and we'll get into that, there are some other groups that share the name. And, it's not something that you can copyright, but at the same time, work together. It's a big city, big state, so we have plenty of room. But, yeah, so you told me a little bit about it. You got started in 2009. How did you come to start Columbus Cars and Coffee?
Yeah, I mean, so when I moved to Columbus, I wanted to go to Cars and Coffee, and there wasn't one to go to. And that's the short answer. The longer answer is that I went to a very small school. I had about 17 classmates from, in high school and even before that. And one of my classmates who I grew up with, went to school with her for a long time. her dad and uncle were in the car business. They owned Nelson Auto Group in Marysville. And so at the time, they owned the largest volume by sales volume Lamborghini dealership in the country.
Right.
This was at the very end of the Diablo run before the Murcielago came out. And because of their success with the Diablo, they became briefly the number one for sales volume. And they were attracting all kinds of clients and crazy things happening to Marysville, Ohio, kind of a random place.
Right.
And where I enter into this is that, I watched my classmate arrive to school in different cars every day. Her dad would drive something from inventory
right.
and drop her off in the morning and then go to work. And so I would watch, literally, I knew what time she would get there. And I would watch to see when she would come in because one day...
Were you really watching for the car or for the girl?
Yeah, well, a little of both. I mean, honestly.
Mostly the car. Let's not lie. It's all about the cars.
Well, I can neither confirm nor deny. But, one day it'd be a Bentley Arnage. The next day it'd be a Hummer H1. The next day it'd be a Diablo. I mean, it was just... Every day was something interesting.
Really, a smorgasbord of cars.
Yeah, and you never knew. And also being, from Delaware, Ohio, kind of a middle-class town, you never saw cars like that.
Right.
I saw them at school because I was fortunate to be able to go to this smaller school outside of where I lived. But, in my hometown, you never saw anything like that. And so it was an occasion every time she arrived. And
I'm sure she loved that.
It's funny because one day I was loading a teacher's car with a bunch of video gear to go shoot a video for a school project, and this was my first exposure to video production.
Wow, okay.
And it was this was years before I started doing it professionally, but I was getting ready to do my very first video shoot that I'd ever done, and it was just for a little school project, and I'm loading this car with video gear, and while I'm doing that, next to me pulls up a yellow Diablo 6.0.
Oh, wow.
Lamborghini, and doors go up, my classmate gets out, goes inside, and then her dad is sitting there, and I just went over and said hi. He knew who we'd met before. Right. And I told him, I'm like, man, I would love to. I jokingly somewhat was like, man, take your kid to work day. I'd love to follow you, to take your kid to work day because I know he had two daughters and he had admitted to me many times that neither of them cared at all about cars. And I'm like, if they don't want to go, maybe I can go. And I was mostly kidding, but kind of not. And he was like, I would love that, man. Anytime he was all about that idea. Right. And so I kind of ran with that, and I followed him to work one day. He actually picked me up at school and took me. Obviously, we coordinated this with parents and everything, and I had
he didn't just randomly pick you up.
No, not. Although in a Bentley or whatever, I'd be like whatever. But I had two classmates that wanted to come too, and so the three of us went, and it was an amazing day. We got to learn a lot about the car business. We heard a lot of interesting stories. Not long before that, one of their very first Murcielago customers had totaled his car.
Oh, wow.
And because it was such an early production car, Lamborghini bought it back to study crash results.
Right.
They do the crash testing to be federally certified, but they only do as many as they have to, and then that's it.
And they're not real world tests where somebody might be using the car.
This was like user error and high speed, and I know who it was and where it was. We won't get into that, but but Lamborghini wanted to see what had happened with this car, and it was really badly wrecked. And so it was actually in the dealership as a wreck. I mean, they had towed it, flatbedded the car there. And so that was there, and then obviously a bunch of other cars, and they were also a Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep franchise, and so they had a lot of Vipers. They've done very well with Viper sales.
That's how I got to know Nelson Auto Group, because my dad was big into the Viper scene, and so we would always go up there to see what new Vipers that they had in store, right? And of course, then I would go wandering off towards the Lamborghinis, right? Mm-hmm. But still, it was, like you said, in Marysville, a place where there was these exotics, and not just nice Mustangs or nice Corvettes, or even the Viper, which was a very rare car, seemed out of place. And then you had the next echelon of cars, these Lamborghinis and things. So Nelson Auto Group was a huge part of that for a long, long time.
Absolutely. They were a huge driver. And I don't think people realize they were flying major A-list celebrities to Marysville on private jets to test drive cars. I mean, Eminem, Snoop Dogg, athletes. I mean, I know I've heard long list of them that came to Marysville, Ohio. No, people would never think that had happened. Obviously, they weren't advertising it. But so where this evolves into a Cars and Coffee group for over a decade is that they used to have at the dealership these amazing car reveal parties. A new car model would come out, and they were really, really good at engagement with the customer. So they would do a big drive, a big party. They'd have like a string quartet and models, and I mean, it was just like a James Bond movie scene or something, And at the end of that, they'd reveal a Lamborghini, and then they'd auction off or raffle off the first test drive of it. And they just had a really good flair for showmanship, I thought. And I got to go to a lot of that because I was friends with the people that owned the dealership. And also, when I got a little older and was thinking about my career, I'd started doing video production. And they started to hire, they were one of my early clients. They started hiring us to shoot video of these events. Back then, it wasn't for use on the internet because it wasn't really a thing yet. Social media was very early, but they wanted to make a DVD every year of all of the event videos that they'd done, and then they would actually include that DVD with a car if you bought one. Just kind of like, hey, you're getting a car, but look at all this other sort of lifestyle and community stuff you're sort of getting.
Interesting.
Out of it. And we would produce that DVD, and so. Around the same time I moved to Columbus, they sold the Lamborghini franchise to a large local dealership conglomerate that shall remain nameless. And
if you're in Central Ohio, you probably know them.
So, they were not as known or really at all known for that same level of engagement and events and that sort of thing. And I thought that was a real shame because I'd met a lot of really cool people that were really fun, really, really genuine people that loved cars, and especially back then, pre-social media being big.
Right.
Those events were like their gathering point. These were people that worked really hard, had businesses, were doctors, whatever, and maybe they had a nice car as a sort of reward to themselves or whatever, but like it wasn't a huge part of their identity or their lifestyle. It was just like, oh, I have a car, and a lot of them honestly felt almost like embarrassed about it. I noticed, I know, especially back then. I noticed like there was almost like I don't really want you to know that that's my car. It was like almost like too flashy.
Yeah, it was a quiet, reserved collector who was like, I just want to enjoy something on the weekend or on a weekday, and I really don't want to like flaunt it. But at the same time, you're buying a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin, and it's like they're flashy, they're eye-catching for a reason.
And these were people that bought them because they love cars, not because it's a status symbol, but they recognized that it could be perceived as a status thing.
I mean, there's a whole nother podcast on that topic alone, which is because I do think there was a paradigm shift in collectors where for a long time in the early 2000s, especially around the financial crisis, where owning that type of car was not seen as a benefit, right? And it was only the weirdos, the psychos that really went towards those cars, or it was the top echelon of people, right? And I think actually with the invention of YouTube and internet video is that more and more people saw these cars and more people admired these cars and wanted to be in them. Yeah. And so there was that shift of now it's not necessarily a show off of the car as much as it is I want to bring joy to other people by giving them the opportunity to see these cars, right? Just like I think it was Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear was saying, like, supercars and hypercars are all about pantomime and showing off, and not to be the big dog, but it's to bring joy to other people, right? Like when I see an Aventador go by, I get happy to see that kind of car out on the road, right? And it doesn't mean like I don't get sad, and maybe that's just me, but it's like I enjoy seeing people out there loving these
Your
things. Your
knee-jerk reaction is not going to be sort of like jealousy or envy. It's more like an appreciation. I mean, it all comes down to also how the owner carries themselves. But I think what is not an absurd thing to say now in the social media era is someone can say that they're sharing their car with others, and that doesn't sound crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't sound cliche.
That's a normal thing now because, they know that random 17-year-olds are going to love their car, and it's not like I want you to think I'm cool, and it's more just like I understand that this inspires and brings happiness to a lot of people.
That actually brings me, it reminds me of when I used to partner as an agent. I used to be a nationwide agent, and we used to partner with Cars and Coffee back in the day, and we were the exclusive agent that got to attend the shows. And every single time I'd come back, whether it be my management or my principal agent would say, how did we do? How many leads did we get? And I said, that's not how this works. Most of these individuals, out of like the idea of sharing a vehicle with that random 17-year-old, right? They may or may not stick around the car because it's mostly like, hey, I want to put this piece of art out for everyone to enjoy, devoid of me being there to either influence their opinion or not, right? Everyone's going to have an opinion, so I just drop this piece of art here and I walk away. and then it takes time to introduce yourself. Like, people aren't flashy. People aren't sitting out in armchairs in front of their cars,
right,
trying to say,
right.
"Look at me in my car." Right?
I mean, there's always exceptions, of course.
There
right?
are always,
but,
yes.
No, on average, that's true. I mean, well, and this gets back to how Cars and Coffee began, because of this reserved, subtle approach that a lot of people in the Midwest have, and maybe it goes beyond the Midwest, I don't know, but, being from here and living here my whole life, it's kind of my observation in Ohio, is that there's a comfort level that comes for the car owners and collectors when they can be around each other.
Right.
They may not even actually know each other personally or not know each other well, but it's like a peer group.
Right.
And you can kind of just sidestep all of any sort of perceived awkwardness or embarrassment or whatever. If you feel like, driving in your own subdivision, kind of like the guy that doesn't want to show off too much, you don't need to feel that way at one of our events.
You feel welcome and included.
Yeah, and so when I wanted to go to an event that honestly didn't exist, Cars and Coffee is obviously not my idea. It had existed for a long time.
Right.
It's in many markets and
call it by any other name, caffeine and cars, or
I mean, it's in a million forms in a million markets. But when I moved to kind of into the quote unquote big city, compared with where I was from, there really wasn't anything like that. There were some car meets, but a lot of
absolutely,
some of them had like kind of bad reputations. It was like nighttime meets and kind of sketchy, and they would like just take over a Home Depot or a Lowe's parking lot. And
I mean, I went to plenty of those in high school.
There's and I'm not take it or leave it, but that's kind of what there was. I didn't really see anything more organized than that. They were always getting chased out of places, too.
The automotive community has a long history of different types of meets, different types of shows, and even now we still have them, right? Absolutely. You have the random meetup shows that are thrown together on the internet, or a phone call, right? Or a text message, say we're all meeting here at the Steak and Shake at 1 o'clock, right? And we're going to show off. Or there's the high level, well put together, oiled and orchestrated Concours events that bring in multi-million dollars, $1 billion worth of cars, right? So,
and a lot of stuff in between.
And a lot of stuff in between. And the amazing thing is that if you boil it all down, the end result is that it's all about the enthusiasts, right? It's all about our shared love of the automobile. And it's something that I've had to explain to a lot of people. And I think you're kind of there too, is that we share a interest in cars and people's interest in cars, right? It goes beyond just a specific brand or a specific model. It goes into, I appreciate somebody else's enthusiasm for a product or for a vehicle.
Right.
And that was such a weird sensation coming into Hagerty that I had to kind of teach myself. And then eventually it was not even a attempted effort. It was just a reflex, is that no matter what it was, whether it be that tuner car that's got way too big of a wing, but somebody's super proud of it, to the multi-billion-dollar collection that somebody has, is that everyone has their joy and their enthusiasm for that particular thing.
And everyone has worked hard for whatever they're bringing to the show, whether it's, $5,000 or $500,000.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
And I find more joy in that now, really, than I do even seeing specific cars. Is like when you said somebody brings that special car to a show, is seeing that random 17-year-old's eyes light up.
Oh, yeah, or even younger. I mean, we see kids that...
Or the 57-year-old.
Well, sure. And we see kids that come with their parents who are 6, 7, 8 years old, and they're, like just kind of figuring out, like, oh, these are really cool cars. And, that watching that light bulb turn on for someone is extremely rewarding, because we all remember when it happened for us.
Right.
Everybody has a story or a couple of stories when they can remember that for them. So Cars and Coffee was born out of wanting to create a new platform for gathering for these car owners, and that was how it started. I wanted to spend time around the cars. I knew I would not be invited to any events that the acquirer, I guess, of the Lamborghini franchise was, if they were going to have any events, which they weren't known to have anyway, but if they were, I wasn't going to get an invite probably. I'm a random 20-something. And, I was like, well, I guess I'll just start my own. And I had met a few people that I thought would be into it. And so our first event was in April of 2009. And I love to tell the story of that meet because for the first 15 minutes, first one we've ever done, we partnered with a major national restaurant chain to do it. They rolled out the red carpet. They were really great about it. They took a chance on this idea, and there I am waiting for literally anyone to show up and there's nobody for the first 15 minutes.
The invite was out there in the ether, and you were just waiting for anyone.
I had reasonable belief that some specific people were coming, but there I am, 15 or 20 minutes in. Our hosts are kind of like, what I thought this, what are you doing? And I was like seriously about to give up hope, and I heard a downshift in the distance. We were near an off ramp for the highway there, and I could hear somebody getting off the highway. And I could tell it was like a V12. I didn't, especially then, I didn't know what it was just from the sound. But, I knew it was something. And sure enough, car rolls in, second car rolls in. And, it was like a Ford GT, a Lamborghini, a Murcielago rolls in. And then a first-gen NSX was there.
Oh, wow.
We had just a nice sprinkling of diverse cars. There was a couple of muscle cars there. It was only like 20 or 25 cars in total by the end of it. But it proved the model because everybody had a great time. We kept hearing about how fun it was. Man, you should do more of these. This was great. When's the next one?
It's great to get out.
And I'm like,
great
I
to use
don't know.
The car
I just
like it's
literally
supposed
made
to
this
be.
up. I don't know when the next one is. Like, you tell me. But that's how it started. So here we are 11 years later. We do about a dozen.
We just finished season 12, yeah.
Yeah, we just finished our 12th season. We do, probably 12 to 15 events per year now. We start in like late March, early April typically, and shut down around Halloween, early November, just because of weather. But it's been a great journey. We've done a lot of cool events, met a ton of great people. And what I've learned is you come for the cars, but you stay for the people.
Right, absolutely.
The cars are almost secondary by the time you've been coming around for a while because you're seeing friends and you're building friendships and relationships with people. And, I just watch people meet for the first time and then later, become friends. And then later, a year or two later, they're like hanging out a lot and maybe traveling together, going to events together. It's just a whole ecosystem unto itself.
Right. And it's fun to see how you can meet somebody at one event and then go into a completely different event, right? And you still see the same people and maybe a different, caffeine and cars, whether it be in Hilliard or wherever, right? And so you still see the same people, right? And it's great to have a easygoing place to meet these people, right? And that's the whole idea of Cars and Coffee. So if anyone's unaware, it's all about meeting people, seeing awesome cars, but having a low-key, fun event.
Yeah, and now, it's free to attend.
Right.
It's predictable in terms of when the schedule is. And it's just a great excuse to get out and do something. Unless
you're talking about 2020, and then nothing's predictable.
Right. Well, there's that.
But you guys also did a really good job in years past, and I'm guessing going forward, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you guys do really good keystone events, right? And one of the big ones that I personally enjoyed because it was just such a cool location. It was a amazing experience to be, down in Central Ohio and seeing people who normally don't come out to our Cars and Coffees in a random parking lot in Grove City or in Powell or in, we were just in Jerome Village, right? And it was seeing everyone at the Scioto Mile event and people coming out of the woodwork to see some amazing curated cars. And that's that can't be easy, right?
Well, it's not. What the inspiration, so the event's called Exotics on Scioto Mile, and we've done it, it's either 3 or 4 times. You'd think I would know.
I think it was going to be 4.
Well, I think this was going to be number 4, but obviously due to COVID. But, again, I didn't invent this idea either. I went to Car Week in Monterey. I've been a handful of times. Probably my favorite time and place of the year is Monterey during Car Week. But while there, I attended Exotics on Broadway, which used to be Exotics on Cannery Row.
Right.
It's the same event. It's moved locations.
Unfortunately. Cannery Row was fun.
Yeah, but what was cool about it was the location was different, number one. It was like a kind of a unique location and setup. But also, most of the events during Car Week are centered around the car owners. Mm-hmm. This was an event that was not actually for them. It was for everybody. It was for the public to come out and see the cars and be near them. There would be no cost to be there, versus $600 to go to the Quail or whatever.
Right,
it was like it stood out because of how it was set up. And I thought, most of my events with Cars and Coffee are primarily targeted to the car owner.
Right.
Yes, we have a lot of spectators and visitors, but the primary focus is for the car owner.
Right.
And I want to do something that is really cool location that's targeted to the public, that anybody can come. It's free. You can come and see it and have it be a unique experience. And I partnered with the city of Columbus, because they don't, what we do is we close a bridge in downtown Columbus, and it's kind of a major connector in downtown.
Yeah.
From one side of downtown to
it's
another.
It's not easy to close a road in
especially
downtown.
A bridge, and like the thinking about emergency services and all those things. So in order to do that, they actually will not do it except for certain scenarios. And what they told me was, we want more large-scale, free public events in the downtown.
Right.
That's a good thing for everybody in Columbus. So the city is willing to like make exceptions for those sorts of things. And so, sure enough, we were able to close the bridge. I had this idea. I was walking on the bridge. I was nearby just one evening at a restaurant, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this would be an amazing car show! Can you imagine?" And I just started thinking about it. And
the gears just started turning.
Yeah, and so we asked, and they were like, "Yeah, all right, sure." So we closed this bridge down, and anyway, so in 2017, which was the first year, we had 5,000 people come out and see this thing. It just caught fire, and we didn't really promote it. It was on social media, but we didn't like advertise. We didn't buy promoted ads. We didn't, we weren't running commercials. We weren't on the radio.
Right.
It was just kind of like, let's see if people respond to this.
And the funny thing is, you can see how one or two people might see it, and then they call people, and then more people show up. Right. And I've been at a couple of these Scioto Mile events, and the exotics on Scioto Mile are just crazy busy with tons of people, which I can see why in 2020 they got rid of it.
Yeah.
Said, hey, we might want to hold off
our
because
last one, we think we had almost 10,000 people.
Which is
it's impossible to count, but what you can do is you can look at photos and you can do estimates based on, like we have to have certain numbers of food trucks and bathrooms and cops per number of people. And so we can kind of give a guess. And yeah, so I don't know exactly how many, but you can tell that it was many, many thousands of people that came out for this. And that's what's really cool about working with our partners and our sponsors with Cars and Coffee, because if we could just do parking lot car shows for free, they are free, but we could do it with no cost to us. We wouldn't need sponsors for that.
That brings up a really good point, is that, you have had the ability to partner with some amazing companies, but we obviously hear from other groups, and Hagerty is part of this. We don't necessarily condone or say not to, right? We want to make sure that the enthusiasts have somewhere to go. And sometimes if that means helping out, we will. But there are other groups that say you can do it without. And there are other groups that say, no, you absolutely have to have it. So it's interesting to see the amazing partners that you've had. And I don't know if you want to talk about some of them, or like maybe like you were alluding to, why they started.
Yeah, longer story short, the way that we started getting sponsorship for our events was that we were on like season 4 or 5. I was 24 or 5 around then, and trying to grow my video business. I wasn't investing in real estate. I was just trying to grow a video production company at the time, and I was running Cars and Coffee, and it was very popular. Our events were doing very well, but they started to cost me money because we would want to ours, unlike many others, moves around. We don't use the same location every time, as you know. There's a few reasons for that, but one of the main ones is just not wanting to be too repetitive. We want to like mix it up. We want to touch different parts of the city in terms of different areas, and also it gives us opportunities to try different stuff. And so as part of that, I started to have mounting costs to run this thing.
Right.
Now, by most reasonable adult standards, it wasn't like that expensive.
Right.
But when you're 24, you're self-employed, no college degree, building a business, then the stakes are a lot higher. And the cost, though it might seem minimal today, was, not consequential to me. So I made the difficult decision after like the 4th or 5th season of doing Cars and Coffee to actually quit. I said, you know what? I love it, but I'm going the wrong way financially doing this, and it's costing a lot of time as well, and I really need to grow my business, which was very young and small at the time, and we weren't setting any records for revenue. So I thought, I need to really focus and like concentrate on what pays my bills.
Right, which is, honestly, one of the most mature decisions someone can do is say, hey, I love this, but I kind of have to let it go.
It was very hard to reach that decision, and it wasn't something that I came to quickly, but it was just after a lot of thinking, I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. So I actually announced that it was ending. I actually put out, I think you just on Facebook at the time, a note from me. It was like at the end of the season, and it was, hey, thanks, this was great. By the way, this was the last one. See ya, good night. And the response was immediate, and it was, no, you can't stop. It was like, we're not allowing you to.
We won't
to
let
stop.
you.
I mean, literally, that's what it was. My mind was made up. I had actually announced that I wasn't doing it. I mean, this was
Legion has spoken.
Yeah, and the community just was like, nope.
They just wouldn't let you quit, huh?
So what was great about that was that when people asked me, why are you stopping, it allowed me to like take a look at, why isn't this working? And for me, it was, I need help. And I don't just mean financial. I mean like actual help. I needed some people to
volunteers and staff.
I was a one-man band at the time for like 4 seasons, and yeah, again, not a huge amount of time, but it was growing. It was getting harder, and I needed help. And also, I wanted some financial help. I wanted to at least break even, And if I could do even better, that's great. But I at least needed to cover my costs.
Right.
And so when I was talking with some people about that, immediately offers were thrown out. Hey, let us come in and help. Let me provide. I'll coordinate everything for you in terms of the coffee vendor.
Right.
Because we always provide coffee for free at our meets, and again, that was a cost as well. But also just like who's going to be there, when are they showing up? Are they going to have a tent? Do they need power? I mean, just all the logistics.
Right.
So somebody was like, let me coordinate that. Another person was like, I've got $1,000 or whatever. Just to throw in to help with this. Another person said I can do a lot better than that, and so it grew into a community effort to keep it going. And that's what allowed me to make the decision to, okay, you know what? Given all these resources of time and expertise and some money, now I'm able to say, all right, I can kind of sign back up for another year of this.
Right.
And I did. And then we haven't stopped since.
And it really has afforded you guys. I know we had a lot of great plans, as they say, plans of mice and men often go awry. We had some really awesome opportunities in 2020. But in years past as well, the sponsorships and partnerships with great partners has afforded this Columbus Cars and Coffee to bring to the table some really, truly amazing events for the populace who can attend. And, that whether it be free, whether that be the season opener events, you guys tried really, really hard to bring not just a lot of great car collectors together, but also to give them something for their time, because a lot of these collectors do want to come and hang out and have a great party, right? And at the same time, it's like free coffee obviously isn't free for everybody. It takes money.
When your events get as big as ours have, the coffee's definitely not free. I mean, we spend a stupid amount of money on coffee. It's ridiculous. But it is right there in our name, so we're not going to not do it.
Well, and like, for example, you guys had at your last event at the Easton Oval, I believe it was, I'm going to blank on the name of the coffee manufacturer, and I bought coffee from them.
Yeah, it was Backroom Coffee Roasters.
Backroom Coffee Roasters, based out of Galena.
Yes.
And fantastic coffee, by the way. I bought a bag. They had some bags there. I bought a little plug for Backroom Coffees. I bought their rum cask roast. Fantastic coffee. My wife, who has been a snob of Starbucks, had my brew and was like, why have we not been buying good coffee? And I just said, that's a good question, honey. Why haven't we?
It's funny because cars and coffee, most people assume the focus is on the cars, and that's true. But we're actually kind of passionate about coffee as well. It's not something that we really tout at the events at all. But what we're passionate about is local independent coffee brands.
Right.
We don't work with any big chains. We don't just, not that wouldn't be fine, but we like the local, like Backroom and others. We work with several.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want to mention them at all? Because I know the Backroom one's one.
Yeah, I mean, so we've worked with so many over the years, I can't really list them all. But what I can tell you is that some are veteran-owned. Mm-hmm. Some are, one-man or two-man bands, really small companies. Some are even large. Some are a bit larger. They've had success. I mean, right. Backroom's actually not tiny. They're doing better. Some you can actually buy in retail stores around here. So we like to support them, and by making the coffee free, people think, oh, you're just, you're giving coffee to your attendees. That's a nice little perk. Well, that's part of it, but the other part of it is we don't make the coffee vendor sell it. There's no point of sale. You're not buying it, and that lets them come out and focus on just, let me be at this event, serve great coffee, enjoy this, be part of it, and I know what I'm going to make financially ahead of time. I don't have to worry about that. And for a food truck or a small business or a coffee vendor, that's not normal. That's absolutely not normal.
Right.
And in fact, a lot of events charge them to even be there. And then on top of that, they have to sell each individual, drink or whatever.
Right.
We don't charge them anything, and then we actually pay them ahead of time. So
I think the last event I had 3 big cups of coffee, and I brought my own cup for COVID. I said, hey, I don't want to use other cups, and he was like absolutely fine with filling it. And it wasn't a small cup; it was a big Yeti cup, and he filled the thing up.
Yeah.
So that's not a cheap cup of coffee,
right?
And they had to have plenty for everybody. So, I mean,
the bigger point though that I want to make about partners and sponsors is that, thanks to Haggerty and other companies that we've worked with, we're able to explore and try different stuff. And a lot of it actually goes to the good of the community, not just our own, but the broader community. So my favorite kind of recent pre-COVID example of this is we actually worked with the local children's hospital. It's a nationwide children's hospital here in Columbus, renowned hospital for children. And they approached us about doing a new kind of fundraiser, and they were looking for ideas. They wanted it to be car centric in some way. They have a relationship with Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Dale had actually expressed interest in doing a fundraiser for the hospital that wasn't just like a quick appearance or a media thing.
Right.
And he wanted to actually raise some money, and he's like, how can we do that? So we thought, we kind of, as a group, we put our heads together and we figured out that we needed to do a dinner here in Columbus or nearby where Dale would appear, but it would be like a small room. This isn't like he's at the stage 1,000 feet away and you can barely see him. We wanted to be like, you are having dinner with him, pretty much.
I have an image of like the Rally for the Ranch, a dinner. Yeah. And that's great. And you're really close to a lot of amazing...
But there's like 700 people there.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was a lot more intimate.
More intimate. It was kind of like fewer people, more expensive. Again, all to charity, literally 100% of the proceeds. And for your money, you not only get to support Nationwide Children's Hospital and the work that they're doing for kids, but you get to talk to Dale, meet him, get photos with him, and then he's also going to tell some great stories. So during the evening, he got up on stage, at a small stage, and he just told racing stories, like beating his dad in a race. That was
which must have been amazing to hear.
He's a great storyteller. He had, got a lot of laughs. He's really entertaining. But he's also a very humble person. He's a really... Dale Earnhardt Jr. is one of the most normal people you'll ever meet. He's very famous. He's done very well for himself. But despite all that, you could run into him at the store and he's just like a totally normal guy.
Right.
And people love that about him. And that's what made the event really successful. And so our sponsors were able to not only help put the event together, but also free my time up to devote to that without, I didn't charge the hospital anything. I didn't charge, I was there on a volunteer basis doing all the promotion, all the recruitment. I helped find the venue for it.
Right.
I was there myself with a table that I paid for. So like doing all of that is not time and money I could really justify without support from people like Haggerty and others.
Right.
And it's allowing us to connect car people with amazing people like Dale Earnhardt Jr., supporting a local thing in the community, bringing it full circle. And that's really cool.
Right. And you guys do a lot of philanthropic work. I mean, in the partnership you guys have with like the Rally for the Ranch, like I want you to go into that because that's been a long-standing relationship that brings in some amazing cars. And I know I personally have some friends who got a little upset about that. And I had to do a very good job of explaining to them, like, look, this is a curated event for charity.
Right.
We're trying to do something new every year.
Yeah, exactly. So the Rally for the Ranch is an annual fundraiser for the Buckeye Ranch. The Buckeye Ranch, and in full disclosure, I am a member of the board of directors at the Buckeye Ranch.
We're not that big, Paul, that you got to do that. But I appreciate it.
I think the context is fair to give because it's an unpaid position. I'm a total volunteer there, but I've been on their board for a few years. But the Buckeye Ranch is this massive nonprofit in Ohio. And when I say massive, we have a $50 million budget. We serve thousands of kids, and it's all kinds of mental and behavioral health services. So it's really critical stuff. It runs a wide range of scenarios, and we don't need to get into all of that here. But what I would say is if you value the health of your community, mental and behavioral health, especially in children, is a huge part of that. And the Buckeye Ranch is kind of uniquely positioned to deal with those issues.
Right. And when you say children, like I want to make sure that the listener knows that we're talking from young children all the way up to adolescents.
All the way to 18. And in fact, we have one program that even extends slightly beyond 18 in terms of transitional housing for kids that are homeless and they're just old enough to not be a minor anymore, but they're old enough that they need to figure something out, but maybe they don't have a job, or so we have a lot of different services we offer. But where the Rally for the Ranch comes in is it's the largest fundraiser for that charity,
right? And
it's a partnership with Bobby Rahal. Bobby has strong ties to this community and to Ohio. Obviously, his son Graham grew up here in New Albany, Ohio, and is a driver for Bobby, alongside Takuma Sato, Indy 500 winner this year.
Yeah, congratulations to them.
So Team Rahal is a big part of this community in a lot of ways, and Bobby wanted to create an event to give back to the ranch, and so the Rally for the Ranch was born. And so it's a car show, it's a dinner, and it's a race experience at Mid-Ohio for the Indy 200, hosted by Honda. And the dinner is the part that makes the money for the charity.
Right.
We charge a bunch of money to go to the dinner, but that's because the car show is free.
Right.
Bobby remembers going to car shows when he was a kid. And, I can't speak for Bobby, but he's told the story 1,000 times. So I'm going to speak for him in this case. He went to car shows as a kid with his dad, and he remembers that experience and how meaningful that was for his father and for him. And he wanted to replicate that opportunity for people here.
Right.
Here and now. So the part at Easton where we do the car show is totally free to attend. We don't charge any kind of admission, even though we are doing this all for charity and honestly could charge a couple bucks and make a lot more.
Right.
It was important to Bobby that we don't let anybody can come. We won't want them to worry about the expense of it. The dinner makes the money, and then the race is our opportunity to entertain our sponsors that really step up for us at that event. And so it's been a great experience for me. And a lot of people ask about Cars and Coffee, and we have a fairly large audience at this point. And what do you can we do more for charity? What do you do for charity? And I'm like, hey, just so you're aware, we support the Rally for the Ranch and the Buckeye Ranch immensely every year, and both financially and in terms of time and resources. We have volunteer hours. We buy tables at the dinners, and during the car show, we actually helped invent a new way to sell a table at Smith & Walensky there at Easton.
Oh, yeah.
Because people were hanging out at this bar on the patio the whole time watching the cars, and I'm like, why don't we monetize this? Let's charge for those tables. So we helped invent that, and then I've bought one every year. So we give back in a lot of ways. What I think a lot of people mean is we want to show up and donate $3 to get in and have that go to a charity, and that's cool, and there's definitely a place for that. But along the same lines of just not wanting to complicate a good thing, I haven't done that. I've wanted to have huge, meaningful impact behind the scenes where possible, and then let the rest kind of just be what it is.
I mean, I think that's the philanthropic aspect of this Columbus Cars and Coffee group is huge. And it's not just from the organizers, you guys. It's from all the participants and all the car collectors who do participate, whether they like it or not, whether they approve of the methods or not. They can get behind a great idea, which is like for the Rally of the Ranch, right?
Yeah.
We need to get behind this great aspect of our community.
Yeah. It's funny because Bobby Rahal is he's really got tough standards for that car show. And that's where a lot of the controversy that you're referencing has come from. Because Bobby, at the very beginning, now, in full disclosure, I have been the car show director for many years, but I wasn't for the first year. It was before I became involved. And then I, last year, stepped down and sort of nominated a replacement for myself. I was getting really busy with some of the real estate stuff, and I had been doing it for like 7 years, or 6 or 7 years. And I was like, you know what? I have a good friend who was right to kind of step in and fill that role, and so I asked him to do it, and he agreed. But in those middle 6 years or so, I was the car show director, and so my job was to recruit the best cars we could find. But Bobby's standards for those cars were like almost, a little impossible for Columbus, Ohio. He was looking for like Pebble Beach cars. Yes, there are some around here, but you're not going to fill Easton. We had approximately 120 parking spaces.
Right.
And, they're not all going to be, perfect Pebble Beach cars. They're not all Concours level cars. And so he was big on no replicas, no plastic. I want all real stuff, collector's items, anywhere you can find them, race pedigreed cars, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, there is some of that here, but there's only so much of it, right?
Right.
And I'm a volunteer. I'm any kind of recruitment I was doing.
How well do you want this show to go?
Yeah, I'm like, any kind of recruitment I have to do for that is just me not doing work and going to meet with somebody to ask them to bring their cars at their own expense to our show. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we've had some great success in McLaren F1 GTR Ferrari 330, the Aston Martin Vulcan. We've had some major heavy hitter cars there, but
I do have to say that Vulcan was kind of like off to the side. Like it didn't seem like where it needed to be.
Right,
Like, why is this here?
Well,
like
also,
looking around, making sure it's like
a lot of these cars, and this has come up many times. Same with the McLaren F1 GTR. We have to push them.
right.
They can start usually, but not always. But they usually can. But like they're either not street legal or they're so valuable they don't even want to start them,
Right.
or whatever. And so a lot of times they'll come off a trailer, and we have like 8 guys that are volunteering that'll push them into their place. But we've had some incredible cars at the show over the years, and that's it has really set it apart from a lot of others. We had this is going to sound like a Dale Jr. show, but we had his NASCAR, his race-driven car was there one year. We had the Bumblebee from Transformers, the Camaro, like that was at the show, the one that was used in the movie,
Right.
courtesy of Rick Hendricks. So we've had a lot of really cool cars at the show, but in the meantime, we've also had to turn a lot of cars away because people are like, "Oh, this is great! We'll be at Easton all day. I want to have my Z06 there." And it's like, dude, I love your Z06. It is awesome, and in any other context, it would be a no-brainer. But here, I can't really I'll get I'll get some pushback.
You almost need to have like a separate spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
the parking lot by it used to be Abuelos and all that stuff. Like that's a car show now, right? It's all the other cars that want to show up for whatever reason.
Yeah, and we kind of we did try that a few times and like had mixed results. But the funny thing is the challenge from Bobby is basically go find as many like top level cars you can find, and then by the way, don't repeat any of them next year.
Right.
And it's like,
That's
okay,
tough.
sure,
That's
no problem.
tough.
Yeah. Let me get right on that. So
You've probably got spreadsheet upon spreadsheet.
yeah, I mean we do. We've it's what's amazing, and I think I'm sure encounter this all the time at Haggerty is how many collections are sleeper collections. There are so many people just here in Columbus or Central Ohio that have unbelievable car collections.
Oh yeah.
But these are not people that participate in any of the shows or any of the Cars and Coffees, not just mine, but any of them.
Yep.
And they're for whatever reason, and all of a sudden you hear about them and I have a couple cars and like, what does that mean? And then you go to their garage and it's like, oh,
yeah,
you have, okay, this is a serious car collection, and
you almost want to ask them, do you know what you have exactly?
Yeah. I mean, it really, and they do, but it's like every time, Columbus is not a huge city. I think we're like number 14 in the U.S. So every time I think I've seen every collection and I know most of the people that are car collectors or own X, Y, or Z cars, I see another car go by and I'm like, who the hell's that guy?
Right.
Because it's like, at this point, haven't I encountered most of them? And it's like, no. Another big part of that is that Columbus is growing and Ohio is growing. And one of my favorite things about Cars and Coffee is that people move here from other cities.
Right.
That have been going to Cars and Coffee where they came from.
Right.
So they get here and they're like, all right, well, so where's the Cars and Coffee? And they find us. We're not finding them. They're finding us. And just this past year, I've probably met 10 people I can think of straight off the top of my head from Virginia, Michigan, Kentucky, Colorado, who have moved here. They're not new to the idea of Cars and Coffee. They're just new to our area.
Right.
And so it's been this unintended but certainly welcome feeder for new cars, new people into our events, and it's been really cool to meet people that way. And also, a lot of times when they get here, it's like the only people they know are from work because they're almost always transferring here because of work. So they know a lot of coworkers and colleagues, but they don't. It's like I want to have a life outside of my office, and cars are their thing. So they meet us, and then we are able to introduce them to this whole world of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's not just our meets; it's like restaurants, bars, events, people, opportunities. And that becomes a really fun thing for me is like being somebody's introduction to our community. It's really been fun. That's, another way that we meet collectors and new, discover new cars is sometimes they're just brand new to the area too.
Right. And constantly probably once a month or so, like you said, I'll see a new car and I'll see somebody who I've never known, or like I'll see a hypercar that I've never seen before, where it'll be like a yellow LaFerrari and it's snowing out. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah, right. And 10 years ago, this would have been unimaginable, right?
Yeah, especially around here.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like Cars and Coffee especially you guys, are curating some amazing events, and you're really pushing not just the philanthropic side of trying to invest back into the community, but you're also trying to give experiences and accessibility. 2020 notwithstanding, it's been a difficult year for a lot of different shows and things like that, but you're really trying to give back to the enthusiasts, right? And I think that's working really well, which is why Hagerty partnered with you guys, which is a lot of people say, like, why are you guys, paying for all these different car shows, not just yours? But it's like, obviously they cost money, and obviously we need to help wherever help may need.
Right.
And sometimes we can't be the ones that say, well, we're bringing the coffee, or we're going to bring the cars, right? So sometimes it is just not, I don't want to say the easier solution, but sometimes it's the more impactful solution.
But sometimes an organization just needs some cash. I mean, that's just it is what it is. Like, you got to operate, right? And so what we appreciate about our partners, I'll tell you, when I learned Hagerty was coming to Columbus, I was really excited. I had encountered Hagerty a couple of times throughout the years as a brand, as an idea. I mean, they're involved in so many things, and I'm like, this is a great company. They host their own events. They are involved in other people's events. I was able to meet McKeel Hagerty at Barrett-Jackson in Scottsdale like 3 years ago. And I sat next to McKeel at a dinner that we were at, and got to talk with him for about an hour. And, we were sitting together by coincidence, but we kind of hit it off. We had a nice conversation. And his leadership and his enthusiasm is so clear, because I've met a lot of people that are tangentially involved with cars, but ultimately they're in it for the business and the money themselves. The cars are just, whatever. We do, whether it's people who sell cars or whatever, there's some brands do great with that. Some really don't care.
Right.
Hagerty, and from McKeel as a person, but also the brand Hagerty, it's actually just a bunch of car enthusiasts. I mean, you yourself.
Yeah.
I've known you for a number of years now, and, you're a real car guy. You're not in the insurance business because you have a passion for insurance. You have a passion for the people that you serve, the cars that they have, their enthusiasm for events that they're going to, things that they're doing. Yeah, you may have an interest in helping them protect their investment and protect their cars, but it's like, that's just a way that you can help them. It's like, you came into this because you love cars, And so when I found out Hagerty was coming here, I was really excited. And I attended this event you guys did, where you sort of shared with our market, hey, here's who we are if you don't know, and here's what we're doing here, and here's what we believe about cars. And there was this great presentation about saving the future of driving and the enthusiasm and the hobby of cars. And I just thought it was so perfectly put that, as technology evolves and we have all these changes in energy sources and all those things, everybody knows what I'm talking about, hybrids and electric cars and all that. Yeah, there's a place for that in terms of like daily commuting, transportation. Maybe they're all great, but that's not what any of us are doing on the weekends for fun. That's getting, maybe you drive a Tesla to your office during the week. I personally don't, but some people do. But when you want to go out for a drive on a beautiful Sunday morning, you don't take the Tesla, you take the MG or the Ferrari or whatever you have. And so Hagerty is a brand that isn't just talking the talk. They literally walk the walk in everything they do. I follow everything you guys put out really closely. And it couldn't be anything but genuine, because it would be so clear if it wasn't. Right.
And I think that has been one of the reasons why we have come to Central Ohio. When we looked at places to build our third headquarters, we were looking for the best enthusiast market, but we were also looking for the best people who could follow that exact mantra, right? And it's almost, I feel like I've drank the Kool-Aid at this point, but like McKeel Hagerty was on back when COVID was preventing real life racing, Hagerty sponsored and partnered with IMSA, and it was actually, strangely enough, at the Mid-Ohio sim racing event for IMSA that there was a big interview with McKeel Hagerty, and McKeel said exactly that. The future of driving is at risk, and we're here to help save it.
Yeah.
And the presenter asked, well, wait a minute. How the heck do you say that if you're only really going after these enthusiast cars? And McKeel, without missing a beat, said, I'm not here to help save commuting. That's just not it. That's not what we're here for. Because when we say we're here to help save the future of driving, it's not just the actual act of driving. It's the feeling of freedom, the choices that you make, the cars that bring back memories, the nostalgia of the old. And we are moving into the nostalgia of the new as well, right? How does the new technology push us forward into helping saving that driving, right? And so
exactly.
we're trying to grasp at everything. Yeah. And that means that we have to be that enthusiast brand that truly believes it, right? And everybody asks me, like, well, you guys have, and this goes back to kind of the insurance side, is like, oh, you guys don't want us to use our cars. No, we've actually changed a lot in saying that a car is a car, but it could also be a gateway into freedom, into a clearer mind, into stress relief, into, you know, that joy of taking your son for a ride in your Viper, or, you know, whatever it may be. So it's a gateway to a lot more in terms of our psyche than it is just a mode of transportation. So that's what we're trying to save. We're not just trying to save the commute. And so that's where we go, we need to protect the MG. We need to protect the Lamborghinis. We need to protect the Porsche Taycans, right?
Yeah.
Like, it may be a daily driver, but at the same time...
But the guy with that car also has a 911.
Right.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So what I think of as commuter cars, they're like appliances.
Yeah, A to B.
Far more than anything else. They're necessary, they're important, and by the way, we can't fight the future. I used to have this attitude of like, I don't want an electric car.
Right.
If I don't buy one and millions of other people like me don't buy them, they'll go away. It's a fad, whatever. Clearly that's not at all the case. This is coming. I don't necessarily like it, but there's nothing I can do to stop it.
Right.
And if you're still on the page of, I wish this just didn't happen, well, it's too late for that now, unfortunately.
But that's been the case throughout all of
it's
automotive history.
It's progress. And,
I mean, when people went from carburetors to fuel injection.
We don't want all that.
We don't want all that. That's complicated.
Well, how about when we went from horses to cars? People were terrified.
Right.
It was like they literally had fake clip-clop hoof noises for cars at the beginning because they were used to hearing the horses. I mean, we don't like change. Humans don't like change. But
I mean, there's a reason why your turn signal makes a click.
Exactly.
It's not needed. It doesn't need to be a click, but it's because the old school blinkers had a relay switch, a physical switch that went from one side to the other, and that was that click.
Yeah.
Right?
People got used to it.
People got used to it. Now the cars, they have to put a nodule in that makes a clicking noise when you hit it.
If it wasn't there, you'd be like, well, why isn't it working? So,
from a guy who rode motorcycles, like, I've forgotten to turn off my turn signal many a time because I didn't hear the click. But it's just one of those things.
So, but here's the thing. As you come to terms with our changing automotive reality, you got to remember that driving will never go away.
No.
We don't do it because we have to do it. We do it because we love it. And as long as that's true, and I think it will be for many, many, many generations, as long as we do our part to introduce new people to it, and keep it going, it's always going to be there. What we have to do now is figure out how do we best protect it and preserve it? What can we be doing to introduce new people? Because, if you don't keep a steady stream of people coming into it, it will die eventually. So you got to keep that's what I love when I see like an 8-year-old with his dad at our Cars and Coffee, you're watching him make that decision even at that age. I want that.
Right.
And he's not looking at the Tesla Model 3. He's looking at the Ferrari 488. You know what I mean? It's like he wants the fun, loud, beautiful car. The other thing that I want to point out, this isn't true for everyone, I don't think, but it's true for me, is that cars can be a great way to lay out a path in your life. And what I mean by that is if I weren't chasing my next car all the time, I would still have other things that would motivate me, but probably not as strongly in a lot of cases as the car does. I mean, it sounds dumb, but if you're a car person, it probably doesn't sound crazy. But, it's like, especially when I was younger, maybe not as much now, but when I was younger, it was like, okay, if I want this car, whatever it might be, I've always been a Lamborghini fan because of my initial exposure to cars in Lamborghinis. Starting with a ride in a Diablo, and we topped out at 160, and that was like my first exposure. It was the very first car I'd ever ridden in like that. So I've always loved Lamborghinis. So for me, it was like, well, those are really expensive. And my parents were both social workers, worked very hard, were, nothing but respect for what they did. But from a financial perspective, it was not going to be something we were going to be doing at some point.
Right.
Dad wasn't going to go out and go buy a Lambo one day. So it was like, if I want to do that, I need to figure out what I need to do differently than not just my parents who were not, this just wasn't a priority for them, but
Right.
but for like differently than other people, because most people can't afford that. Most people can't do it. I myself have not yet done it,
Right.
know, but you got to align yourself with what you want from your life. And obviously cars are not the only thing you want,
Right.
but it's a major motivating factor for a lot of people. And especially if you're young and you don't have a great sense of direction, which I think is true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Probably more so now than ever. Maybe not ever, but
And
I
it
think
doesn't have to be just young people
I think
either.
it's hard out there.
Yeah,
It's
it
like
is.
it's difficult to figure out what you want to do. And this isn't going to provide you all the answers, but it gives you like, okay, here's a goal. It's lofty as hell, but I'm going to just kind of keep that in the back of my mind. And if what I'm doing isn't getting me closer to that, even very, very slowly, if it's not getting me closer, probably not doing the right thing.
Right.
And
I think that's a huge part of it. And who knew that you could come to this lowly automotive podcast and find life advice? But you're absolutely right, man, is that these cars, like, and I hate to say it, but the ability to have exposure as a young kid or even a young adult or an old adult to see, I want that, and give that driving factor of how do I get there? That's huge. And it's absolutely true that people who find that motivating factor in their life will change and do something for the better. We may not be able to tell you what that is, but just like this, a podcast, it's set it up, video production, go out and do it.
Yeah, just start doing it. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing I've heard throughout the entire industry of either creative thinking or in business is just get out and do it and set yourself goals and work
one
towards
day
them.
I imagine that Joe Rogan decided, I'm going to have a podcast. And it was probably a modest enterprise at first, but he just did a $100 million deal. So, when you do yours, I'd like to come on again.
Oh, yeah. I'll absolutely have you on.
But, so here's the other thing that I want to point out about cars and anything like this, any kind of passion, is that if you find other people that share your passion, in our case it's cars, but for some people it's golf, for some people it's art, whatever your thing is. First of all, it's your passion, so that's what makes it important. But second to that, it's also a door opener. You can get your foot in the door in so many different ways and places. I am a guy from Delaware, Ohio. I don't come from a wealthy family. I don't come from a poor family either, to be fair.
Right.
But I didn't need...
You're middle class.
Right. I don't want to overstate it, but yeah, it was sort of just very middle class, And I have watched the winner's circle at Pebble Beach from the Bugatti hospitality suite. I have met Jay Leno and I've been to his garage. I've hung out with Dale Earnhardt Jr., David Letterman, and it's
McKeel Haggerty,
all these great people. And this isn't to name drop. The point is to say, if without my love of cars and pursuing it for years, not having any idea where it would lead, not wanting anything particular from it other than just wanting to be around it, I would have never been in any of those situations.
Right.
How would I have been?
It's interesting that can correlate, that interest in cars. It could be an interest in video games. It could be an interest in art. Whatever your interest is, if you can find a way to draw yourself and give motivation to that, that's going to motivate you to do better, right? And I see so many times nowadays, there are countless doors being opened and shut. Don't listen to the establishment on what you have to do, what you don't want to do, because you'll never know. There is no perfect roadmap.
No, it's true. And, the world is much smaller once you identify a passion that you have and you look for others that have it. The world shrinks very quickly. What do I have in common with someone like Jay Leno?
Right.
Basically nothing. We're not from the same generation. He's a world famous celebrity with a ton of money. All of those things. I'm none of those things, but yet our paths have crossed because of cars.
Right.
And
common
crossed
interests,
a couple of
common
times.
loves.
And sometimes I have moments where I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this, and it's really amazing. But I owe that to just believing in what I'm doing and enjoying it and not needing or wanting anything specific from it and just trusting it. Sometimes it's less fun than other times, to be honest, but it has its rewards too. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I want to thank you and Haggerty as well for supporting this season, especially because of especially with COVID. Because right as you guys announced you're coming to town, you and I knew each other before that,
right?
And we decided, hey, we want to work together. This would be great. It's great for Cars and Coffee. It's great for Haggerty. Let's do this. We had all these grand visions and plans of what this year
we did.
Could be, and we had some specific ideas. And I don't want to share them now because I think we might want to do them again in the future. So we may be talking about this again in a future episode. But
note to self: edit that part of the video out where I mentioned all of these in the pre-post.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
So we had all these ideas, and then COVID comes around, and all of a sudden I have this realization that all of what Cars and Coffee is gathering. It's a gathering thing, at its essence.
Uncontrollable too.
Exactly, and that's literally uncontrollable in the sense that I never actually know exactly how many people are coming, and it's usually a lot. It's very hard to control that. And so as the state of Ohio is saying you can't have more than 10 people in one spot, I'm like, well, that's going to rule out of most of our events,
Right.
We don't have too many that are 9 people. So what was really critical was as we adapted all of that in real time, none of our sponsors this year backed out. And that meant the world to us because it was like we'd already actually reached agreements with most of our sponsors for the year prior to this. And that was based on the understanding of what the season would be. And that's what it would have been if there wasn't COVID. And it would have not been totally unreasonable for any or all to say, hey, look, it's not really what we signed up for. Sorry, give us our money back or some of it back or, how can we... And what I said to you and what I said to everybody was we will deliver events this year. Number one, we're going to figure out how to do it safely.
Right. And we did.
Within the guidelines that the CDC and the Ohio Department of Health put out. But not only that, we're going to make sure that there's new ways of thinking about this. And so we started our season on Instagram Live. Mm-hmm. By now in the pandemic, everybody's really sick of virtual stuff. And I'm right at the top of that list.
I'm there with you.
Freaking stand it. And so I'm not doing any more of it now. But at the time, it wasn't so... We hadn't all burned out on it yet. And
we weren't blaming Zoom for the COVID outbreak.
Yeah, and so we were like, hey, we can't have Cars and Coffee the way we wanted to, but I'm going to do every Saturday that we would have had an event, I'm going to do an hour-long Instagram Live broadcast, but I'm actually going to do it collaboratively with our members so that they can talk about what they're doing and show their cars off and talk about stuff. And we're going to make it kind of like a little show. And it was very impromptu. I had never done it before. Yes, I have a production company, but we don't do that. It's two different things.
Right. It hadn't come about.
It was not an area I was familiar with. We don't do anything live in my business. It's all edited.
Pre-recorded and scripted.
Right. So we started this. And it was amazing because we actually had really great viewership. I mean, it was way bigger than I expected. We had over 1,000 people watch each one we did, which considering you're just watching me talk to you like in selfie mode on my iPhone from my office, I mean, that's pretty cool, And we were able to... Through Instagram, we were able to tour collections like from MF Autos, Dr. M3 over in Pittsburgh is a close friend of mine. We checked in with several of our members here in town.
A couple of the partnerships that we've got going on too.
Yeah. We talked to some of the sponsors and asked them what they were up to. We just kind of kept the community together. We kept it going. And it got us to the point where we were able to actually start doing in-person events again. So, I want to thank you again because obviously, nobody's ideal version of the year, obviously. And I appreciate that you guys stuck with us. You trusted in the process. You knew that it would be a little bit of a weird year and not exactly what we had hoped for, but at the same time that there would still be some cool things happening.
Right.
And by the end of the year, we just had our last meet on Halloween. And extremely well attended, hundreds and hundreds of people, huge car turnout.
All socially distanced, wearing masks. Distanced,
with face masks required, obviously also all outdoors, which helps. And, what that meant was that we were able to figure out a balance between, complying with what's safe and healthy but not just not having a season.
Right.
And that was such a validation of that model to see everybody enjoying themselves. Our percentage of people wearing masks was extremely high, as we expect it to be. But like people were willing to like, hey, I'll put on the mask, I'll come out, I'll make these adaptations and changes because I want to keep this thing going.
Right.
And our whole motto was keep the season going. Like, do your part, keep the season going. We don't all love the rules, but here's the thing: it's what we got to do.
The community came out in droves to really support.
They did, and in fact, one of our members, we had a location that we normally use with one of our partners, and Buyers Imports is a longtime partner of ours, and they have a park right across the street from them, where we typically have our
city
events.
Park, right?
Yeah, and it's owned by the city of Whitehall, Ohio, and they said, you guys can't do your events here this year just because of COVID. We just don't want you to do it. And we were like, so all year, no matter what? Yep, sorry, can't do it. Well, that really eliminated a big location for us because we do move around, like I said earlier in the podcast, but we do, despite moving around, we have a couple of spots that we use a lot.
Yeah.
This is one of those. 2
or 3 spots that are quintessentially, like, if it's not a big fancy event or a curated event, it's probably at one of those 2 spots.
And this was one of them. It was probably our main place. And one of our members is in commercial real estate. He's a Ferrari guy. He's a member. He wasn't he wasn't trying to get spotlight. He was just like, look, I have a commercial real estate business. We own some big buildings. Those big buildings have big parking lots. Yep. They're in good locations. Here's one near Easton we just bought. Would you want to use it? And I'm like, this was like a lifesaver. And first of all, unfortunately for him, everybody loved the location. So I don't know I think he may have realized at the end of the year that he'd set himself up because he's like, oh man, people are just loving this location. I don't know if we're ever going to leave. But he was not a sponsor. He certainly...
But he stepped up.
Deserved to be in the sense of that he provided something so great. But my point is that he did it out of the love of what we were doing.
Do you want to drop the name of the company?
So, Brad Kitchen with Altera Real Estate here in Columbus is...
Great guy.
Just a selfless act. I mean, so many people would say, hey, if I'm really going to be doing all... because it's a lot. You're going to have hundreds of people at your property. Some of them are going to have to go in and use the restroom. Some of them are going to want water. So, whatever. All the infrastructure that you provide... It's not a small thing to ask. And we didn't do it once. We did it like 4 or 5 times this year. And in one case, we did it like, I think twice within the span of like 2 weeks.
And he was just turned it around. Yeah, he also turned it around and offered it very quickly. Because I remember when it became like, hey, we don't know where we're going to be holding it. Yeah. And then you were like, oh, we're doing it here.
He didn't hesitate. And it was great because when I asked him each time, I always felt, I never felt comfortable asking him if we could do it again. Not because he's not a nice guy or anything, but just because I know what I'm asking. It's not a small favor. And I would text him or call him and I'd be like, hey, we got another event coming up. And every time I asked, immediately he's like, go for it. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Great. Just so nice and selfless to put that together for us. And, Brad is one of the people, but there's so many others too that just stepped up. And all the sponsors stuck with us. Our members stuck with us. They followed the rules. They made a safe season, and we were able to get a lot. Actually, we had about the same number of events. Not maybe we missed a few, but we had about the same number of meets that we normally would, and it was possible because we had more than we normally would each month because we had to consolidate it. But it turned out to be a really good season, actually. Like, we met a lot of new people. We had great feedback. Sponsors are happy.
Huge feedback.
It's it was rewarding because we thought this is going to be a disaster when COVID hit. And
I
it
remember,
turned out to actually be pretty good. So,
I remember calling you going, Paul, what are we going to do, man?
Right. We had just agreed on all this, like these events, and we were really worried. And of course, we don't want to be unsafe. We don't want to get anybody sick. So wanted to do the right thing. And that was first and foremost. And then second to that is how do we do right by our sponsors and the expectations that we have. So yeah, it turned out to be a great year. We really appreciate everybody's enthusiasm and support. I've received several emails in the last 2 days after our season ended, a couple of days, from people who are thanking us. And there's a common thread too, which is, hey, we had no other events we could really go to that were free, outdoor, safe, that we felt like this was a sense of normalcy for people because it was normal for the most part, except everybody was wearing masks. And so it actually, like, I forget sometimes, like, I think of it as it's just a car show. And yeah, in a way it is, but to some people it's more than that. It represents an escape or a bright spot in their week. Another great example of this is we have a great volunteer group that helps run
huge.
the
Great
events.
guys.
There's 6 or 7 guys. They're all in their basically 20s, early 30s. And this is a funny thing because I needed volunteers a few years ago, and I put out the word that I was looking for some, and I was picturing that somebody would volunteer for a year of events and then would be done.
Right.
Maybe not even a year, maybe just a few of them. And I was wrong because what happened was guys signed up, and then they came back, and then they came back, and they love it so much that, and I'm like, guys, are you sure you want to still? I mean, it's just volunteer. It's a lot of work, but we just need some extra, help sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're here. We want to do it. So the commitment I've made to them is we tend to attract as volunteers like people in their early 20s.
Right.
And these are people who are figuring out their career path, their next steps.
Right.
Sometimes they're in college, sometimes not, but they're kind of at that point in life. And so my commitment to them is, look, I may or may not be able to pay you depending on what we're doing. We do have sponsorship, but we don't have unlimited budget. Our margins are not huge here.
Right.
So if I can't pay you, and generally I can't, what I can do for you is I'm going to make sure that you have every opportunity to meet anybody you want to meet, do any internship, any letter of recommendation, any connection we can help with, we do. And we're really proud because we've actually found actual full-time, long-term employment for several of our volunteers. Some of them with current sponsors, some with other companies. We have one that's really interested in aviation, and he was able to intern with NetJets for a whole year because of a connection we have.
That's
One of our members is a NetJets guy. So that's been another way that people have stepped up, is these amazing volunteers that just, they're there every time, and they're always willing to help out.
I mean, the Cars and Coffee group, not only are the volunteers amazing, but so are all the participants. So I implore you, if you are an enthusiast out here in the Columbus market, go check out columbuscarsandcoffee.com. Pay attention. Sign up for emails. Sign up for notifications, because they do some amazing events, and 2021's coming fast, and it's going to be some really great events. And I've got Paul here, but we're running out of time, so we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this. So Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast. We've been here talking about Paul Milligan, his story, his future in cars, as well as the Columbus Cars and Coffee Group, and just getting a little bit into that. But we're going to get into a heck of a lot more here on part 2 of the interview. So we're going to be coming back to you guys on episode 23 and 20. Where are we at? 23 and 24. So we'll be coming right back real soon, guys. So we're going to redo that. We're going to pause. I just want to say thanks so much for Paul for joining us here for part 1, because we're definitely talking about some great stuff, but we didn't want to stop because we went onto so many different avenues. But we can't wait to get into part 2 of this in our episode 23. So stay tuned for that. But this has been the Midwest Motoring Podcast, sponsored by Hagerty. As always, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep driving.
Perfect.